Okay, everyone, welcome to our judges conference tonight. We're here, of course, in Red Bluff, California. We've got people. No, we're not going to do a mic tonight because we have a rabbit show going on behind us. So all of our presenters are going to use voices that are a little bigger than normal so that we don't interrupt with the rabbit show. Of course, we're here in Red Bluff at CRCS, our annual kind of Christmas holiday show. And we decided to put a judges conference on tonight. We've got a wonderful lineup for not only the judges here and audience, but also people across the world who are watching live on Facebook tonight. We have expert, not only judges, but also breeders in their field, in what they do every day, what they think about when they're at work, what they think about when they're home in their barns. Those are the best people to give these talks on very specific traits. And I think that we're going to be really enlightened tonight. You know, sometimes we have 15 minutes and we're supposed to talk about one breed. You know, if you raise fuzzy lops, for example, you can talk for 15 minutes, probably 3 hours on one aspect, like the head alone. So that's, of course, why Carol's going to talk about fuzzy lop heads tonight. Just a reminder, the conference has officially begun. Make sure you sign in and sign out so you get credit if you are attending tonight. We did have a couple presenters cancel, but we filled them in with some last-minute additions, and we're going to do a panel discussion later on, which is going to dive into some really kind of touchy elephant-in-the-room questions, and we're going to have judges join us up here, and they've never seen the questions before, so very excited about that. Last but not least, you're going to notice a lot of the presenters tonight are young. I think that it's really cool in this hobby that we can start off as youth, as many of us had, and become basically experts at what we do. And some of the youngest people in our hobby are some of the most talented. Of course, they know technology, and they put on great presentations, but they spend just as much time thinking, breathing, living this hobby as any one of us. And we're excited to welcome some of those young up-and-coming judges and registrars tonight to give topics on areas that they know very well. So without further ado, we're going to move into our posing and handling presentation by ARBA Judge Nate Burbridge from Utah.
Okay.
You're going to sit right there.
Thanks so much for having me today, and thanks so much to back up. All right. And thanks to Alan for putting this together and saving all of us. We really appreciate it.
And try to speak up.
Really loud. Okay. So my name's Nate Burbridge. I've been a ARBA member since I was 9 years old. I've raised fuzzy lops and hollow lops, and most recently my kids have been raising mini satins. What I wanted to do is we're handing out some index cards today and some pencils, and while we get going, I want to have you write down on one side, why do you show rabbits? Will you advance it to the next slide? Why do we come and do this? Week in and week out, right? All right, so I'm just going to call on a few and shout it out, and then I'll repeat it for our folks that are presenting on video. So Carol, why do you do this?
Because I love the challenge of always breeding a beautiful animal and trying to get better.
Okay. Carol loves to breed a beautiful animal and try to always get them better. All right. Kevin, why do you do this? The friends, right? Okay. All right. Over here.
The competition.
Yeah. The competition. All right. What about the competition that you love?
The challenge.
Okay. The challenge. All right. Right here in front.
At first, like when I was a younger youth, it was to make money at fair, but then I made a lot of friends, and so now I'm really good with friends.
Okay. So she started so she could make money at the fair, and then she figured it was rabbits, and you'll never make any money doing rabbits, right?
Yep.
So that's a losing business. All right, in the back, why do you do rabbits?
People share my passion.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So think of your very favorite judge. All right. Think of your very favorite judge. And what are the traits and characteristics that this judge shows? All right. So on the flip side of your card, write that down. And then we're going to gather them up, and I'm going to read some of them for you. Kathy's ready. Kathy, will you gather them up?
Yes.
All right. So the first one would be your very favorite judge is what? The one that always picks your rabbits, right? Wrong answer. That's not the right, it's not, the perfect judge is not one that you always win under. It's the one that is the most knowledgeable about your breed, knows how to pose them, and knows that you'll get a fair shot, right? So let's, while Kathy's grabbing these, we'll come back and read them. Okay, got any more cards? We good? Perfect. Thanks, Alan. All right, let's read these and see what they say. All right, the first one says, handles very carefully, takes their time, and poses even when the rabbit isn't cooperative, right? That one's perfect. Accurate evaluation to the standard with excellent posing, handling skills, and fair and honest while entertaining evaluation. Okay, and this one we got a bunch of just names of judges. These are great. My favorite judge is very fun to talk to and is always willing to give advice. Okay, when I was a boy, so starting this really young, there were judges that you loved and there were judges that you absolutely dreaded when you saw your rabbit on the list. One of my very favorite judges was Daryl Bramhall, and I remember as a boy bringing the rabbits up to the table, and they were all drunk, I'm sure. But what he did is he had the softest hands. I don't know, has anybody in the audience, did anybody ever show under this guy? Okay, Alan did. Did anybody over here? Okay, what did you like about Daryl?
Yeah, he was gentle.
The gentlest, right? What was amazing is he could have these rabbits that, you know, sometimes you'd see in the olden days they'd have hollow lops and you just shake them to death and then pin them to the table and then, right, to see how much depth they had over the top. But what Daryl was able to do is he had the most gentle, soft hands, was able to pose them beautifully. And he can make even the ugliest rabbit give it the best chance for the day. So let's talk about what that includes. Okay, we advance the next slide. Okay. Remember, as a judge, you're always communicating. Everything that you do behind the table is communicating. People are interpreting, people are listening. What you look like, what you say, how you say it, when you say it, right? I wanted to give you a little funny story about a Belgian hare. When I very first got my judge's license, I'm in judging PA State Convention. I'm super overwhelmed, right? It's one of my very first shows, and of course, like the first breed on the table, bring up the Belgian hares, and I'm like, oh crap, I've got to judge, and there's like 50 or something Belgian hares. I don't even know a good one from a bad one. Okay, Alan has the most perfect example of posing a beautiful Belgian hare. I'm sweating, my face is just dripping, I'm really nervous and overwhelmed. A judge comes over to me and says, oh, you can do this, they're really easy to pose. And I'm like, what? It's a Belgian hare, like, and he's like the best. He's like, you just reach under their tail, grab them by the testicles and yank them, and they all jump up and they sit perfectly like statues. I'm like, really? Because I don't do that when somebody, right? So whatever, right? So the very first one, pull out the senior box, right? Reach under the table, yank them, and the rabbit like flies to the ceiling, right? Isn't that what you do if somebody grabbed you there? Kathy's shoulder is like 2 tables down and sees this like fiasco and runs over. She's like, what are you doing? No, never, ever do that again. So I'm like, all right, show me how to do this, right? We got through it. It was fine. I'm sure I was like the crappiest judge of the weekend that judged the Belgian hares, but we got through it. Number one, don't ever do that, right? Don't grab them by the genitals and make them fly to the ceiling. If you can do better than that, you'll do better than I did with the Belgian hares on the first time around.
And number 2, don't trust that person.
Don't ever listen to that person again. I could have been like a joke, but it was somebody that I really trusted. So yeah, soft, gentle hands. And if you don't know, just walk to the judge next door and just say, how do I do this, right? Come give me a quick pointer. Preferably before you get started, right? But ask questions, that's the biggest thing. treat them gentle, and they will, if they're bred correctly, pose beautifully like that. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, light hands are the key. When you say light hands, what does that mean? Kathy, what do you think of?
Just not aggressive and rough.
Okay, all right. When you think of a judge that has light hands, what are those characteristics?
They're calm.
Okay,
Their demeanor is.
all right. Why is slow moving important?
I think that fast
Okay. All right. What else? Alan, what do you think in the back?
Light hands.
Yeah.
Firm. Also.
Okay.
Put up a gentle touch at the same time. You don't want it to be too light. The rabbit doesn't respond. Not so hard. The rabbit.
Right. Okay. Alan was saying it's not just light hands, you have to have firm hands. Be firm, otherwise they're gonna run and, you gotta show them how to do this. All right, let's go to the next slide. Okay. When you're checking for DQs, carefully think about how you're doing this, right? Because that's the first introduction to the breeders as to what and how you're going to handle these animals. Do we have is there a table I can use, or is that just right here? Does that matter?
No, no, no.
Okay.
That's all right.
Let's just grab one, and Kathy, you grab one of those fuzzy ones. Sure. A cute little tiny one, right? All right. So when you're flipping over the rabbit, is this still okay? Is this
Perfect.
okay? So you're pulling the rabbit out of the coop, judge it. Right? How are you? Are you dragging it out of the cage? Or are you just lifting it up softly, putting it down? Right? Before I would check for DQs, I would give it a quick, right? Just pose it, see how she does, then just gently, with the 2 fingers around the ears, softly behind the rump, flip her over, start the DQs, right? Start to check. This is where Alan was saying that you need to have a firm hand, because if you don't, they're going to kick, they're going to flip over, and they will injure themselves. All right? Okay, let's go to the next one. All right. Are my comments and my actions deliberate while I'm judging? This is another key in posing, in handling the animals that are up on the table. Who has judged or shown under judges that give the same exact comments in a class of 9 senior buck, black senior buck Polish, right? And you're like, what? This doesn't even work, right? So are the comments that you're making deliberate? Do they accurately describe the animal in front of you, right? The other thing is, oftentimes, as a judge, you're nervous, it's really fun, and you try to be really cutesy and come up with whatever for descriptions. Do your descriptions match what's contained in the standard of perfection, right? Be deliberate in your descriptions of the animal in front of you, all right? When you are posing the animal and looking at the entire group, are you posing each of them the exact same way, right? Are you posing some of the fuzzy lops down like that, and others, on their tippy toes, like that? All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, this is a big one. Am I really nervous? Am I too nervous with a certain breed? Kathy, we put it back for just a second. Okay, here's another funny story. This is like all the terrible judging stories that I have in my book. And Alan, I'm sure, knows about. You were there when I did this. Be confident in the breed, right? Have an understanding of the breed, and if you're not comfortable, practice. I had a run-in with the Belgian Hares a number of years ago. I was super nervous with them. They were really skittish. I'd never really been around them in my entire life. Living in Utah, I hadn't been around Britannia Petites. I was judging at a show at the Arizona Convention. There were just a handful of Britannia Petites. and I'm super nervous. They're on my list. Okay, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this? Let's just get through them really fast, and we'll be fine. We'll get through it, right? So I start pulling them out, and what do Brits do? What do?
Freak out.
They freak out, right? Because I'm super nervous. They can feel my little heart racing, right? And Brits, they're nippers, right? That's just part of who they are as a breed. Don't be afraid. Just deal with it, right? Well, I was so nervous. This little Brit bit me, and I flipped through it on the floor, right? Terrible, terrible thing to do as a judge, right? Don't ever do that, okay? Luckily, the owner of the Brit was very patient with me. What would you recommend we're almost done. Perfect. What would you recommend if you're nervous with a breed? Kate?
To calm yourself,
Yeah.
and then calm the animal.
Okay.
Put it back in a cage,
to get more
maybe,
confidence with the breed, what do?
Oh, get one and work
Get
with it.
one, right? So this is what I did. I got a Brit, and we played with it, and we figured out what they do, right? And now I'm not nervous when I judge Brits, okay? If you're not comfortable with it and you want to become comfortable with it, go get one. Figure out how to do it. All right, let's advance to the next one. Okay, always, always, always ask yourself, when I'm looking at tattoos, when I'm checking for DQs, when I'm posing the animal, am I too rough, right? Constantly do that, and you will better yourself as a judge. Let's go to the next one. Okay, next, we'll go quickly. Am I posing the breed correctly? Am I over posing? Am I under posing? You'll see these are two mini satins. One of them stretched out long like a Himalayan, the other one's posed correctly, all right? So then you're asking yourself, am I giving each rabbit a fair shake at the table? If I'm not posing each of them correctly, they're gonna look differently, right? Let's go to the next one. Finally, all right. This is the same fuzzy lop, right? The one on the side won best in show. The one on the other side had a terrible hair day, right? Okay. Good rabbits can look really awful on different days of the week, different days of the month, different time of the year. Always comment, give something nice, give a compliment about the rabbit. Sometimes, as a judge, you want to say, there's nothing good about this rabbit. Well, it has a great tail. Has really good torque coloring, right? Has the cutest spot on its elbow, right? Say something kind about it, all right? And then next, at the end of the day, just keep it fun. Keep it light. We all have hard jobs. There's a lot of stresses in life. Coming to a rabbit show should not be one of them. If it's not, take a break. Take a break from judging. Find the fun back in the hobby and get back into it, all right? That's all. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thanks so much for having us today.
Does anyone have any questions for Nate? It's actually one of the, it's the only judges conference topic that's required by the guidelines set by the ARBA. You have to start every judges conference with one on posing and handling because it's so important. So if there are no questions, thank you very much, Nate, for your time tonight. It was a very thought-provoking and totally different angle and a really important angle to approach that subject. Next, we're going to move on to ARBA's newest licensed judge, right?
Second newest.
Second newest, 1016.
Steve Shea.
But you are 1016?
Yes.
Yes, ARBA Judge 1016, Alan Rafferty. Should have been judged 10 years ago, but he is a judge now. I'm sorry?
Judging code?
No, we'll help you hold him up here. So come on over. So Alan's going to talk about a really hot contemporary topic right now, which is lilac color. Of course, the lilac breed has been long established, but we're seeing lilac in other breeds now that the language and the wording is a little bit different than the lilac we think is the template for the lilac color, right? Such as lilac Havana, amongst other things. So Rafferty, as a Havana breeder, is going to approach the subject. And I consider this kind of like an elephant in the room topic because it's one that confuses the heck out of a lot of people, but nobody ever talks about it. So the difference between lilac color across the SOP.
If you have not signed in yet, feel free to come sign in. You do not have to be a judge or a registrar. We just need people to sign in if you're here for the sessions. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding me. I forgot.
Make sure you sign out as well. There's time in, sign out. That's one of the main things. Make sure you do.
Thank you. Not right now. They come up at the end.
Go ahead.
All right, my name is Alan Rafferty, Judge 1016. I've actually raised lilacs in several breeds, opposite and best of variety wins at conventions and nationals in a couple of them, Netherland dwarfs and Havanas. So today I was asked to present on lilac color variation across the SOP, which I subtitled Shades of Pink Tinted Gray. Because the vast majority of breeds do call for that pink tint. So, defining lilac color. I went to actually look at the definition of lilac to see if there was something consistent we could build on. Lilac's a color that's a pale violet tone, representing the average shade of color between lilac flowers. So I went looking for pictures of lilac flowers to see if I have a base color to start from. Go. We have this. We have this, we have this, we have this, and here we get confusing because these are all lilacs. So we see across the flowers, there's a vast range of shades of lilac flower color. So I figured, okay, what's the other term we consider we look at lilac? It's dove gray. So I went looking for examples of gray doves. Okay, we have these, these, and these. So we see across even the doves, there's a vast range of colors and shades accepted. Now if we look at the rabbit breeds that approve lilac, we have the fuzzy lop, 3 of the 4 Angoras, the English spot, the Havana, the Hemi, the Holland, the Jersey Woolly, the lilac breed itself, which calls them standard, 3 of the 3 lot breeds, Mini Rex, Netherland Dwarf, the Tan, and we also see the Mini Satin and Satins both have variety. The lead one has the variety lilac self-accepted. The Satin allows for lilac otter, and the Mini Satin allows for lilac variations in Silver Martin, otter, and Siamese, among other colors. Plus, there's also multiple breeds that are looking to bring in a lilac variety in. So we see there's a large range of approved lilacs within the standard. And here we see the varying descriptions. If we skip over to the next slide, I break them down into which ones have which. Medium dove gray with a pink tint, 8 breeds call for that. Pink or pinky dove gray, there's 5. 5 call for dove gray with a pink tint. 1 requires medium dove gray with doesn't specify pink tint. And one breed calls for light to medium dove gray with a delicate pink tint. Now, breaking it down across the breeds. Here we have a picture of, it's an older picture, best I could find, of a lilac English Angora. Now when you break down the different breeds, skip next one. We see here the British lilac, very pale. Next, we see a lilac convention best of breed winner. A lilac Havana, best opposite sex of breed winner. Lilac satin from the lilac satin presentation. And a lilac Rex. Now, what's breaking down the difference between why the lilac colors are going to appear different is the fur type themselves. Within a hair shaft, there's a certain number of pigment molecules within the hair shaft. Now, the same number of pigment cells are within each hair shaft, but it's going to depend on length and thickness and quantity of those hairs. It's going to depend on how intense that shade of lilac appears. If you have a very long guard hair, like say a French Angora, it's going to have those pigment cells spread out much further distance. The opposite end of the spectrum, you have Rex fur, which is very shortened hairs, so the color is going to be much more concentrated. Now we'll bring back that later. When you compare something like the rollback coat of a true lilac, the color is going to be lighter because the coat itself is a little bit longer and each hair shaft is a little bit thicker. You refine that a little bit and shorten it a little bit and make it into, say, a flyback coat like what the Havana has, the color is going to appear more intense because those pigment molecules are more concentrated. You refine that even further and go to the satin color, you're going to see an even more intense color, an even more concentrated version of the color, because the satin fur itself is not only shorter, even more refined, so condensing all those pigment molecules together, but also has that hollow, those hollow pockets in the hair, which make it more refractive. For example, going back to the Angoras, there's going to be a difference between English Angora, French, and satin, because the English Angora has less guard hairs, so you're going to see more of the lighter colored lilac undercolor, versus the French, which has more guard hairs, and the satin, with the guard hairs are have those hollow hair strands, make the hair coat more intense in its overall color. So we bring out some of the breed examples, please. All right, perfect. Sit. All right, take this and hold. Somebody hold that one individually. One sit. All right. So up here, first up we have the lilac breed itself. It has that. It has this one's refers to as a medium shade of lilac, and it is medium because that hair shaft is longer. Each hair itself is slightly thicker, and there is. It's also been selected with the modifiers for a paler version of medium. Next up, we have another rabbit that calls for a medium shade of lilac. This is a lilac Havana. You can see they're more refined, softer, faster coat from a flyback coat versus that of the rollback coat of the lilac. Also, the luster and parts a little bit more shine to it, so it gives the rabbit a little bit, makes the color a little more intense and a little bit more, a little darker in appearance. Over here, this is a lilac mini satin. It's a pop out, so again, it's a darker, more refractive color, but still, that's still lilac. Contrast that with, again, the shortest coated animal, but notice how it seems paler than most. Well, the difference between a Rex coat and a normal furred coat is the guard hairs, which are normally darker and show more pigment, are much shorter. They barely hover above the undercoat. So what you're seeing on the lilac Rex coat versus the other lilacs is you're seeing the lighter color of the undercoat with the barely visible guard hairs. Now, let's go back. That when you're comparing lilacs, your takeaway message is don't compare them all to the lilac breed standard. You want to compare them to each one's own individual breed standard. Each variety has its own description, and while you don't notice judges insisting that all blue varieties of rabbits are the same. In blues, we have blue Beverins at one end, which are judged to the blue Beverin standard. At the other end of the scale, we've got the blue Americans, the blue Satins, which are much darker and judged to their own breed standard. When I was going for my judging license, when I would comment on purr or fair chocolate color on, say, a Dutch or Netherlands dwarf, people were always like, well, it's not a Havana, you can't hold the Havana standard. So the takeaway message is don't hold each lilac variety to the lilac breed standard. Hold it to its own standard, and remember that the fur type and modifiers involved in making that color are going to have an impact on each of those varieties. Thank you.
Hey, Carol. Carol, do you want to go down? Are you going to just take a little?
No, I guess not.
If so, we can.
I didn't bring it around.
All right, thank you very much to Alan Rafferty, Judge 1016, for diving into the color differences of the same variety throughout the SOP and how very different they are. I had never really thought about the fur length before and its stretching of the modifiers. thinking more about that one. Next is a very wonderful woman and a longtime friend to California and the whole ARBA. She is a judge, of course, but a celebrated American Fuzzy Lop breeder. Started as a 4-H mom, and now look at her. She's still doing rabbits.
Still short.
Yeah, you're still, that makes two of us. She's going to talk tonight about the head of the Fuzzy Lop, and she's going to say why it's important. And I have to I admitted to her earlier, I give a presentation on fuzzies. I think it's my favorite one to give. And I stole a lot of stuff from her a long time ago from a talk she did about 10 years ago, where she talks about the head of the fancy. So without further ado,
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
And I like that, you know, that Alan brought up how the judges that are just talking today are all young. So remember, young at heart.
That's what counts.
So as Alan said, I started out in this hobby more than 20 years ago when I went to a 4-H meeting with my daughter. She was 9 or 10, and she said, the only project I want to do is rabbits. So we went up and said, okay, we want to do rabbits. They said, oh, sorry, the rabbit project leader just quit. We don't have the rabbit project. And Kendall was like, what? I want to do rabbits. You know how they do it. And I said, you know what, how much time could it take? I mean, okay, I don't know anything about rabbits, but I mean, what? A year or two, we'll have a rabbit, and so you can see where it went. It went, I don't know, you could say uphill or downhill, one or the other. So anyway, my kids actually started with Holland Lops, and then the day they saw Fuzzy Lop, they fell in love with those. And ever since we've had Fuzzy Lops, lots of Fuzzy Lops at our house. So I'm going to start out. The Fuzzy Lop is so great that we can't do a talk on all of the Fuzzy Lop. We have to focus on the head this time. Next time we'll move on to the body. So all right. So I'm going to talk. I actually am going to add some other material at the end. So let's have the next slide. All right, this is the slide that Alan is talking about, because in addition to being a rabbit breeder and a judge, I actually have a job and work, and I'm a scientist, so I love graphs and data. So I took the standard of perfection and divided it up so that you could easily see that in the Fuzzy Lop, American Fuzzy Lop, the head is 30 points and the body is 30 points. They're absolutely equal. But the other thing that comes from that, which I think I'll talk about in the next slide, but that is that the head has more points than any other breed in the standard. So, you know, this is our new American Fuzzy Lop breed guidebook, and guess what we have on the front of it? We got the big head of a Fuzzy Lop. So, go on. Again, the motto for American Fuzzy Lop Rabbit Club is the head of the fancy, and you can see why. 30 points for the head, more than any other breed. And there are three major components that I'm going to talk about during the titles. We'll talk about the size, the shape, and then the head. And this is something I stole from Alan, by the way. His presentation has things that I took out. He makes a good point. Just saying that a rabbit, the Fuzzy Lop, has a good head really doesn't give it justice. There's a lot of parts to it, and it's a very important part of the breed. Next slide. So first we'll start with the head size. So the standard says the head shall be massive in appearance. And so in doing that, we often say to teach people kind of about the breed to start, we'll point out, just look at the head to body ratio. And I think this picture here pretty much shows it. If you think that the head is about a third of the rabbit, then the body is the 2/3. Just remember, not surprising, that does generally have a smaller head, although we've had does that have got some giant heads too. So it's all in that breed, something that we're really breeding for. Next we worry about the shape of the head. Consider that. And this is similar to some other Lop breeds. Can you see? Am I in the way? It says in the standard, the head shall have good width, beginning at the base of the ears and carried down between the eyes to a well-filled muzzle. So the width is really to be continuous from the top to the bottom, to the muzzle or chin. And then faults we're looking at long, narrow, angular heads and sure you've seen the narrowness between the eyes and a pinched muzzle. And these are they're different. These two look different, but good examples of them, of a good head shape or good curvature to the head. And then finally the headset. If anything, this will be, let's say, the most controversial and confusing part of the head of a fuzzy lop. So the standard says the head shall be set close and of medium height on the shoulder. That's the easy part. It talks about a medium headset and what the high point should be. I didn't bring up my standard because I don't want to read it, but what the standard says right now is super confusing, frankly. It really talks about a high point at more or less the wrong place. So that's being worked on. I think that will be better and clearer in the newest standard that comes out. So be aware of that. I've also heard some judges say, I don't know what a medium headset is, and so I could never pick a fuzzy for Best in Show because I don't know what it is. Well, apparently some people know what it is because fuzzies win Best in Shows quite a bit, including the ARBA convention. Thank you, Alan Messick. So it's been really good for our breed, and it's well deserved. So the high point really is, if you look at this picture, I think this one, and you saw Nate used a fuzzy lop too for an example. It showed it pretty well. It was not really at the shoulder, but just a little behind. It is pretty subtle. It's hard to see. I'm going to show you some pictures of different fuzzies and what's good and what we would consider not as good. They're obvious, but the ones that are good, there's slight variations in those. But, you know, it's not a Holland lop. So don't try to pull the rabbit up, pull its head up high. And certainly not a mini lop. Don't smash it down to the table either. So I really do think in the standard we need some clarification on medium headset, and I think that is going to come in the new standard. At least that's one of the goals, I think, of this committee. So, okay, here's some examples. I think the first one, the broken black, it's pretty obvious. It's too low. It's a fuzzy lop that does kind of look like a crappy mini lop, so it's not right. The one below, it's a rabbit that has a beautiful head. In fact, several years ago was the best of breed at convention, but still now we would consider it too low and flat. Then we've got two more that I think are way too high. Don't they look like Holland lops with wool? So part of that can be how it was posed and it bring one over. It is possible to take some fuzzy lops and keep pulling up on their head until they stand up high. Try not to do that. I mean, try to be gentle with them. It's because there are others that when you pull up, they go really flat. So they don't like to be handled that way. So think of the things Nate was talking about. But yeah, those are two that really look more like Holland lops. And then there's three over on the right there's variations. You can see the one all the way to the right looks a little bit higher. Then there's the solid tort, not posed as high, but they're all right. They don't have the head as the high part or even the highest point of the shoulder necessarily. It can be just behind that. Okay, so here's my bonus topics. Aren't the ears part of the head? I have a rabbit that the mama bit the ears off of when it was a baby. I'm keeping it for breeding purposes. I meant to get a picture of it so that you can see. If you don't have those ears wrapping around the head doesn't look the same. It doesn't look that big. It doesn't look as attractive. So the ears should be well placed, lopping vertically from a wide, slightly flattened ear base. So they're going to come right down by the cheeks, basically. They're going to have good substance, opening that's close to the cheeks, not flaring out, wide and well-rounded. And you can see kind of the shape of these. They have good substance, nice and thick. I thought it was interesting. These are pictures. These two on the right, the solid torts, are my rabbits. They look almost identical. One's a baby, just to show that, you know, even as they're young, they can see that they look good and pick that out. So it's not a fuzzy lop if it doesn't have ears. So that's the point of this. Really important to have the ears be good as well as the head. And next. All right, this is the slightly controversial, maybe not controversial topic. I have heard, first of all, I've had a couple of judges tell me that they were at judging and somebody, and I don't know if it was another judge or a fuzzy lop exhibitor, say, oh, you can never call it a crown in a fuzzy lop. They don't have a crown. Don't talk about the crown. Fuzzy lop people don't like it. All right? I don't know who those fuzzy lop people are, but that's what they say. Then I've also heard, as a judge, never make a comment about the crown because the crown is not, there's no reference to the crown in the standard. Well, I thought it was a good idea. Let's read the standard. And it actually, first I started with this. I said, maybe I don't know what the crown is, so I'm going to go to the standard and look up the definition. So there's the definition in red. It's a strong basal ridge of cartilage at the top of the head, forming the ear base on some lock-eared breeds. I do think that sounds more like and is more obvious in a French lop than it is in a fuzzy lop. But then look at our standard. It certainly does. It is a fiction that we don't mention the crown. It's in 3 places. Under ears, it does call it a wide, slightly flattened ear base. But also there's a statement, a crown is desirable. And under ears, there's a default to have a slipped crown. So obviously a fuzzy lop does have a crown. You can talk about it and you're judging. It may not be as obvious as in a French lop or even a Holland lop, but it's still, you need something to hook those ears to, right? So, and then the other thing, they said you can't talk about it because there are no points in the standard for the crown. The points are rolled into the ears. I mean, it's all one thing. So it's not called out specifically, that's true, but it still is a very important part of the head and the look of the animal. And so that's it. That's my rant on that. One more thing before I leave. Posing fuzzy lops, Nate's already talked about it. It's really important. I said a few things. Don't smash them down. Don't grab them and wiggle them. They're pretty gentle. They kind of like to be coaxed into place. Say please. Next, is there anything else? Oh, how to make a fuzzy lop exhibitor crazy. Don't put your hand over their head. You just hit. You just hit an important point. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Carol? I don't know, Carol, if you... I thought a lot about it when I raised the breed.
Yeah.
I think that the standard is better than it used to be. Remember when you used to say a high headset, but then just grab a Florida white?
Yeah.
It was like
It's better.
absolutely impossible.
Still be a little bit.
But do you think that some of the history, or some of the reasons the standard is a bit skewed is because of the history? Why?
Because the breed came from Holland lops, and the people who started with the breed really wanted to make sure it was different. That it wasn't just a Holland lop.
That's kind of the conclusion. What Carol's saying is that because the breed came from Holland lops, when the breed was recognized in like 87, 88, the breeders tried really hard to be different. So they tried to come up with different language that just didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's getting closer. This standard is better, but I think more words to describe the medium headset better would be useful.
If you were talking to new judges or that wanted to learn more, would you say that they should check out the next standard revision that's coming out because it's going to have some stuff that's updated? Okay, cool. All right, very good. Next, thank you very much, Carol. We are going to invite a young face up to talk about chinchilla color, and that's Seth Thomas, ARBA registrar from Nevada, but living in Oregon. Kind of both. He is going to school at the Oregon State University, studying.
I'm a double major, double minor.
Double major, double minor. Smart kid with a lot on his plate. And he grew up in Nevada raising American chins, right?
Yep, American chins.
So couldn't ask for somebody better to talk about the color. Across the standard, you did some compare and contrast amongst not just American chins, but other breeds that recognize chin. And you got some enlightening stuff for us.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Seth.
Excited to get started.
All right, cool. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the effects of different fur types on chinchilla color, as well as just chinchilla color as a whole as we're going through. So And then, so just an overall breakdown. First, I want to go through all of the core aspects of chinchilla color and what makes it up as you're going through. So once we've kind of established that baseline moving forward, kind of going through with that along the way as you're looking through how that changes as you're looking at different fur types. So mainly focusing on wool type, Rex coats, satins, and then just normal fur. And so banding's where we're going to start. That's generally what people think of when they think of chinchilla color looking forward. The 5 main bands I always like to point out here on a really cool drawing from Melissa Mattis, actually, that kind of outlines them very distinctly. So you have your dark slate undercolor beginning, kind of like your first band there. Then you have your brighter pearl intermediate band, which is generally the band that most people are going to think of as they're going through. And then you're going to have a darker band right above that, a really distinct black band, then a lighter band, and then you're getting the surface color, but it ends up looking almost like a black band because you have that black tipping from the guard hair there. That's really indicative of what that overall animal surface color is going to be looking like going through. So I kind of count it as both a banding aspect and a surface color aspect as you're looking at it. So for surface color, kind of a lot of different aspects of that, specifically in how the standard describes surface color in a lot of ways, especially if you're thinking of those core 3 chinchilla breeds. They're looking for a wavy surface color. Wavy surface color means a lot of things to a lot of different people, but one thing that is really used in American chinchillas is we think of like a hexagon pattern. So if you're looking at a honeycomb, that's almost what you want to see. How I was taught it when I was growing up was you want to be able to trace lines with your eyes. If you can look at a chinchilla rabbit from a distance and it feels like it's a solid color, it's not what you're going for. So as you're looking up here, I have kind of 2 dramatic examples of it. So over the shoulder region, that salt and pepper color, it's really just like dots of black and white. You aren't able to trace any lines in between it as you're looking at it. It's almost kind of a solid color if you were to like print out a piece of carpet and look at it. Now if you look at the wavy surface color, you can pick up individual ridges, you can see areas of dips, you can see areas that's variating. And another way to check that, especially on a longer coated breed, is if you pinch with your fingers, you're going to see different clumps of dark and light hair coming through. So there's going to be that kind of unevenness as you're looking through, and that's how you're kind of achieving that wavy surface color. I'd say wavy surface color is probably one of the most discounted features, especially judging the chinchilla breeds as judges are looking through. A lot of times you have people who pull it back, look right at the band, don't look at anything else. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of that fallacy going forward, because one cool thing about the chinchilla breeds is actually all 3 of them outline a point breakdown for how much you should weigh undercolor, how much you should weigh rings, and how much you should weigh surface color. And I feel like that balance isn't necessarily something people think of, and especially if you're a new judge a little bit worried about what chinchilla color is going to be looking like, it's a great guide for how you should wear the different aspects of it looking forward. So another thing to note though, this is mainly for longer coated breeds. It's going to be harder to get that really, really distinct wave on a breed with a shorter coat or an animal that has a shorter coat. So that can also be indicative of a shorter coat overall in the animal, or just kind of what that breed standard is as you're looking through. So some general banding variation, and these are all actually separate faults that we're going to be looking at here. So one of the bands that you're going to notice lacking most frequently in a lot of chinchillas is that really distinct black band right over the top. A lot of them will have it, but a lot of them don't really have a distinct feature of it as they're going through, especially in breeds that don't put a lot of weight on color. So if you look at that first image over there, it basically goes straight from that white. There's kind of a black band there, but it really goes kind of straight into that white intermixing that you're looking for there, and then into that surface. You can also tell that that animal has a relatively lighter surface going through, because that black band also ends up adding a lot of definition to that overall darker surface color appearance. Now, if you look at the next band over here, has a lot of things that judges would really like. Really crisp, really clean, pretty bright. Another aspect of banding that people don't necessarily think of is proportions of bands. So the intermediate band there is a little bit too big, not quite a wide band, which I'll talk about a little later. But it's a little bit larger than you'd want it to be. You want to have a little bit more of that base color coming up. That's probably the opposite of the fault you'd most frequently find. Most of the time you're going to find one looking a little bit more like this one over here. A really razor thin band there. A lot of that base color coming up. So that's kind of the opposite of that. If you found that, or if you're a breeder, that's something that you like to have in there because it helps work in, especially if you have a thinner band there. But both of those should be faulted just because those bands aren't quite in proportion. Especially this band over here, because with a really narrow band sometimes, it's really hard to define the clarity and brightness of that color. So the 3 chinchilla breeds, like I was talking about earlier, so they have weights of color points in them. So they separate undercolor, ring color and definition, and surface color. The key takeaway from all of them, because they do weight color a little bit differently in all of them, surface color is the highest point earner in every single chinchilla breed. Surface color is worth the most as you're evaluating color there, and generally surface color also indicates a lot of good things about the color underneath it as you're looking there. So with your ring color and definition, that's your second most going forward. So actually, only 2 of the breeds have definition on there, but definition kind of goes in with ring color as you're evaluating it. It's how crisp that pearl band is as you're looking at it, how fine those lines are. So as you're looking at that ring color, it also is where you're integrating that black band into your points, as well as that lighter white band over the top. So it's all of those rings, not counting that base color. So if you're thinking about it in proportion, maybe how you've thought about looking at chinchilla, where you peel back the fur, look at the white band, slide it back. If you actually weigh the color proportions, especially in those chinchilla breeds, that white band's probably worth a lot less as that intermediate band than you think it is worth point-wise. Because that intermediate band's part of the black band, it's part of the white band above it, it's weighed less than surface color. So kind of weighing that in as you're evaluating chinchilla breeds. And then the lowest weight, but still given its own separate points, is that kind of undercolor you're finding there. So you're wanting that deep slate blue undercolor, easy to define as you're looking at it. So they also all have consistent agouti characteristics as you're moving through. So just another general thing to think of, especially as we're switching up fur types going between them. So you're going to find eye circles. A really distinct one for the chinchillas, especially, is that white nape of the neck. It's pretty pops really heavily against that gray and black bound color. And then you're also going to find black ear tipping on a lot of them. DQs also vary between different breeds in terms of what of those agouti characteristics are absolutely necessary. For example, American chinchillas are the only chinchilla breed to disqualify for the lack of an eye circle. So they kind of vary a little bit in that, but generally you're going to always be looking for those chinchilla characteristics, as well as they also are kind of general indicators of good chinchilla color. If you have really dark tipped ears, if you have clean large eye circles, you're going to have cleaner bands and nice dark tipping on the ends as well. So working with satins, kind of the easiest one to conceptually transfer forward. So it's a similar kind of full layout. Obviously, you're just going for that different satin coat and the sheen. Changes the appearance a little bit as you're looking at it. And also in the description of the standard, they call it a sparkling blend of black and pearl. But one key difference in terms of how satin describes their chinchilla color coming through is that it's defined by those 2 bands right below it. So surface color is defined by that black band and that white band right there. So that more hollow hair shaft, you're going to see darker chinchillas for more defined that black band. You're going to see lighter ones if they're going to have more of that lighter band or less defined black band moving forward. And then getting into ones that are a little bit more hard to construe as you're going through here. So wool. So as you're looking at chinchilla and wool, the kind of thing is it's generally going to have all those same characteristics there. They're just going to be in a more muted fashion. So if you see the Jersey woolly up there, still kind of identifiable tips going through. They describe in the Angora standard that you're going to be looking through and see individual black guard hairs there, but it's not going to kind of create that same effect of that overall chinchilla surface that you're looking at. It's going to be more muted there. As you can see, you still have that like black ear tipping, some chinchilla characteristics on the face. And as you're blowing into that ring as well, I used a chinchilla or a chestnut ring here just kind of because it got the best angle that I was looking for. But you're still going to be able to see ring definition in there as well. So that's another thing you should still be able to evaluate on that Angora coat. And then Rex coats. So mini Rex call for even, while Rex coats actually call for a surface color that's either wavy or even. So a differentiation in how those 2 standards are defining their surface color there, but the consistency is both of them are going to fault for salt and pepper. Salt and pepper is kind of a similar concept as what you're thinking of it in a normal coat. Looks a little bit different here. That buck up there is actually a little bit salt and peppered as well. But if you're looking at your kind of ideal mini Rex, as you're seeing it move through, because it has that darker surface and lighter underneath, creates a marbled appearance as you kind of are working with it there. So you'll be able to kind of see those features coming through a live animal that I can't quite show you on the screen here. So surface color as well varies pretty dramatically in mini Rex, especially because it is such a shorter coat. So you're going to be seeing the kind of lighter surface color over here, more central one here, and a darker one. So that's typically uniform surface color, but way too dark for my personal taste here. You're also going to be able to fault it on other things going through. So that really dark surface color is also going to have other faults generally associated with it. So that animal, for example, has a really narrow band that we're about to look at. But that one in the center is a little bit more salt and peppered, but kind of more the bounds that we're looking for as well. And then banding, because it is shorter, you can still get those definitions of bands, but a lot of times you're at the top of that coat there, going to lose that more clean, distinct black band and that clean, distinct white band from the mini Rex coat. So that's just another thing to look for at it. As you can see over there, that's an example of very poor banding. Chinchilla mini Rex there. Not really defined, and that's kind of, you can see the super dark surface color over there, so the kind of basal color affecting the surface that you're looking at. And then just kind of some other general considerations to take into account as you're looking at them. So wideband animals, in most breeds they're actually not a disqualification for wideband, but you are going to be able to look at it and kind of obviously detract from it in many ways from color fault points. So they're going to generally have lighter surfaces, but you can still identify a wavy surface pattern on a wideband animal. Just be more of a fault for differences in black and white as they're being compared there. Kind of not that perfect ratio that you're looking for. And then it's going to have, again, similar to that larger band we looked at earlier, far too big intermediate band, kind of overshadowing those other features. They also generally have a lighter black band defined, a lighter base color as well. So you're not really going to see that coming as clearly. So even though it's not necessarily DQ, there's generally a lot of faults that kind of come with it in that color score system. And then obviously there's other color versions of chinchilla, especially if you look at mini lops. There are every color you could imagine under the sun there. So just kind of taking into consideration how those other colors are going to play into it. You're still looking for that crisp, bright chinchilla, all those kind of pearl aspects we look through. But sometimes it's not going to come through quite as clear, obviously, if you're looking at it differently. Sometimes it's more muted as well in those characteristics. Yeah. And then thank you to all of these amazing people that let me use photos and drawings from them. It took a lot of different photos and images in order to create all those different bird types. Yeah.
Stay there. That was insane. That was so great. First of all, I have questions. Anyone else have questions for Seth?
It was amazing.
That was like out of this world. Yeah, Seth, thank you very much, because I didn't say this, but Seth is actually filling in for Kendall Bledsoe, was supposed to do this talk tonight, and I'm so grateful that you came. No, I'm not discounting Kendall, but that was out of this world. One of the best judges conferences I've ever seen. Can you tell us, in your experience, you've looked at a lot of chin, you've raised American chins, is there one breed, if we were going to go and look at a breed that recognizes chinchilla, that seems to be more consistent than others, and maybe that has a better example of the variety?
Some of the best coats I've actually seen are on import animals. So when you see import animals, a lot of times a lot more points on fur, a lot
In
more
what
points on
breed?
color. In standard chins over there, so like I guess they're general chins, but standard chins there. Kind of here, I'd say best surface color you're finding really frequently on American chinchillas, just because they do put that honeycomb emphasis on it as you're going through. But you're going to find coat length correlated really heavily with that surface color as you're looking at it. So if you find a really well-coated chinchilla, you're generally also going to find one that's pretty defined. I think it's pretty variable. Giant chins generally don't put as much weight on color, so I'd say it's generally either a standard chinchilla or an American chinchilla that I found demonstrating really great ones. Like we've had some great, actually we've crossed standard chinchillas and American chinchillas before, and that's produced the best color we've ever gotten out of chin litters. So it really just kind of depends on, once you kind of block in that coat length and the clarity, a lot of times if you're working on surface color, the rest kind of falls into place.
I was in France last summer, and we did like a little workshop, and one of the guys that came over was a chinchilla dwarf breeder, and he was really critical on undercolor. And I had like a light bulb moment when he said the reason that undercolor is faded oftentimes is in less dense coats. So you see more skin, so therefore it gives an illusion of having lighter undercolor. Do you think that's true?
Now that you say yeah, actually, because most of my rabbits that have I've won fur with at conventions and other things, those rabbits have extremely dark undercolors, and you're also finding generally much denser coats with darkness. But I also feel like a darker kind of undercolor is also generally associated with more guard hair, which is going to create more density. I always see correlations. So if you have a darker surface color, a darker black band, you're also generally having a darker undercolor. Same thing with lighter all the way through. But in terms of fur, I think it has that correlation to guard hair, which is generally what brings in a lot of that darkness for the chinchillas.
And you talked a lot about proportion, and I think we focus on it when we judge casters and chestnuts a lot, because casters, chestnuts a little more common than chinchilla or versions of chinchilla in other breeds. The underband and the intermediate band, should they be the same width?
So it varies between standards, how they describe it, actually, which was
Okay.
interesting to me as I was looking through. So some of them describe them as equal width, some of them describe them as a little bit smaller. Generally what I'm looking for as I'm going through for it, if you can pull up the first, or we can pull up the, or you can just talk about it too. Generally, kind of, as you have that base color, it should be equivalent to, base color should be equivalent to the rest of the bands. So you have the base, and then you have intermediate black band, second light band surface. That chunk should be equal to your base looking through. Because that's still a very large, defined pearl band. I like my pearl band to basically be pushing as far towards being half and half as you possibly can, but not quite over.
Half and meaning it's the same width as the underband.
Yeah, so if you look at that one, a little bit angled in the photo, you have your undercolor there. That's about half compared to what the pearl band is there, the black band, and then the white band on top of it.
So in essence, you're at 3 sections.
3 sections, but kind of the end two should equal the under.
Right.
Because generally you're having a thinner band there, and on a longer coat it gives you more room to have a really large, like dark undercolor. Generally longer coats expand a lot of ways in that undercolor too. It's kind of probably part of why more defined undercolor is correlated to better fur. But it's generally expanding a lot more in that undercolor when you're increasing the length of the coat.
Do you find that the color improves in breeds that have more emphasis in color points?
Yes, I think it's from evaluating color, especially going through this presentation and reading all the standards for chinchilla color. They go in grave detail in the 3 chinchilla breeds about what they're looking for. They create a point scale, which I think is something really valuable, especially looking at, for example, mini satins. Coppers had a point scale for it, but chinchillas didn't, which was interesting for 2 different agouti breeds. But a lot of times chinchillas described very quickly, not a lot of points emphasized on it, and especially when I've seen other breeders working in chinchilla breeds and say mini lops or Netherland dwarfs, they're basically peel back, does it have a pearl band? Yes, done. And that's kind of what they do. When if you were to maybe improve a point scale or think about that emphasis more, I might balance out a little bit too.
Do all 3 chinchilla breeds have a point scale?
All 3 chinchilla breeds have a point scale, and all 3 of them, they don't allocate the same amount of points because obviously they have different overall color points, but they allocate it in the same ratio. So it's always most on surface, second most on bands, least on the undercolor. But the fact that they define undercolors needs to be counted for points for them too.
Amazing. Any other questions? No? Seth, thank you very much for pulling this literally out of your hat. This week is really great. Do you think that chinchillas will be with you the rest of your life? Is that something that you
Hopefully,
just love?
I mean, I like amchins a lot.
Yeah.
They're one of my favorite things. Definitely done a lot of work with them, so hopefully I can keep them up.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Let's take a 15-minute break. We're allowed to do that. So, and then we're going to come back with Kevin's talk on commonly overlooked color DQs, okay?
If you haven't signed in, please come sign in.
And that's right. If you haven't signed in, whether you're a judge or not, we would love to have your name on our list. Sorry,